if Chelsea had shown more patience with Tuchel last September, he'd likely still be managing them. Nagelsmann probably would still be with Bayern, and Potter would still be at Brighton. But where would De Zerbi be, asked Whittaker Wall? I mean, the decision to replace Tuchel with Potter is one that people are going back to a lot. There's a lot of suggestions as well that it wasn't entirely a footballing decision to let Tuchel go. Was bringing Potter in the first place the real mistake here?
I think if you're a club like Chelsea and you either embrace that you're in a long-term, middle to long-term project, or you bring a big name, and they did neither. You know, they just stood in between. They gave him a 5-year contract, and then they ended in a few months. So they really need to get this right, because we need to have a clearer picture of what Chelsea really wants beside titles, because you have all these players and you have these options as managers. And we were talking about Nagelsmann, and I'd be very curious to see what Nagelsmann learned from his Bayern Munich experience, especially dealing with big names in the dressing room. Because with Luis Enrique, for example, you have the finished product. You know exactly what you're going to get. It's very clear, his football vision, his temper, his ideas. And with Nagelsmann, it's not that it's not clear, of course it is, but it is different. And besides, can you imagine the Twitch lives that you would get with Luis Enrique? I'm in for that. I'm totally in for that.
Okay, your team, Enrique. Daniel, where do you stand, and how much sympathy do you have for Graham Potter, a man who, even with the likes of Enzo Fernandez, João Felix, João Felix, no? Okay. Yeah, so even with the likes of Enzo Fernandez, João Felix, Mudryk, even with the wing-backs, Chilwell and Reece James back, even with Kante returning, wasn't able to get past a 2-0 defeat at home to Villa.
No, and there were mistakes made on his part. There's no doubt about that, and his reputation will suffer temporarily as a result. And I think probably in the more medium to long term in terms of getting a big job, but you can't just throw. There are several Premier League clubs over the last few years who prove that you can't just. The owners always talk about a vision. They always say the word vision over and over again, as if like that just saying the word makes it true. It's not a magic spell. You actually have to commit to that in a cohesive way. And you appoint a manager who, in his managerial career before Chelsea, had managed 2 players who had cost £20 million, which was Enoch Mwepu at Brighton and Andre Ayew at Swansea. Chelsea have got 3 £20 million players plus on loan out this season. He's got about 20 in the squad. He isn't a fit for that unless you make him a fit for that. And by just throwing money at players and saying, well, obviously this is going to come together at some point. It might do, but that was my argument to Liam. If that's all you want, you get a manager who manages egos. Don't get a tactician, because if all you're going to do is throw players together and you're saying there's such a wealth of talent that it'll work eventually, what you want is those players to be happy. And clearly they didn't sound like they were that impressed with Potter. So go and try and get a Zidane or someone to manage egos. Luis Enrique might be the perfect middle ground between that, but it doesn't sound like they've got a vision. It sounds like they say they've got a vision, and that's not the same thing.
Sasha, do you want to talk about Villa, by the way?
We'll mention Villa as well. I just want to say about Potter, I think maybe in his situation, he was a man perhaps overwhelmed by options, because we can see so much chopping and changing. He's clearly a guy with a lot of ideas about football, and he's probably looking at it like, I can play 40 different combinations here. And we see like crazy things, like, Ziyech playing right wing back, although maybe he was trying to teach Ziyech a lesson, like, for example, when he lost disastrously at Spurs. But I think you could see that gradually he was being worn down by the situation. He was being worn down every time being asked, when are you getting sacked? And I think, as I said previously, I think for a club like Chelsea, you cannot have a normal guy. And Potter is very, very, very normal. You need that extra character, I think, there that perhaps maybe Potter doesn't have yet. Interesting to see what will happen to him, because perhaps a similar thing that happened to Brendan Rodgers. Rodgers, was promoted from Swansea to Liverpool. 3 seasons there, but it fell apart quite dramatically. He rebuilt himself. Of course, we'll get on to what's happening with him now. Perhaps a step down before step back up. But I think overall, I'm still not sold on the timing of this, because what are they trying to achieve unless they're really bringing someone in? Because the league season is dead, and they have quite a few good teams to play still, but there's nothing to do there.
They're 12 points off the top 4.
But there's nothing they can do in the league, and they still have 7 of the top 8 to play. They're not going to get anywhere near the top 4. So he could
Champions League.
Yeah, they're trying to save the Champions League.
Exactly. But so they looked at it and they went, so this guy who just battered Borussia Dortmund pretty comprehensively over 2 legs has no chance against Real Madrid. Well, not many teams have a chance against Real Madrid. And I don't know, I was was really pro continuity here, because to give him maybe an extra 7-10 days to train, to prepare, rather than maybe his assistant will do a similar thing now, but I just think the timing is really odd.
The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.